airport was closed as long as it was and why it was not more prepared considering its importance. Mr Wicking said he believed Heathrow's Terminal 5 could have been ready to receive repatriation flights by late morning on the day of the closure, as there were opportunities also to get flights out. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, GB News can exclusively reveal that the Conservatives are planning for a second vote on a national grooming gang inquiry. GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters, the man who's done so much to bring this important story to national attention, sat down with the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch earlier today, and he joins me now. Charlie, a big moment.
Yes, and several announcements coming forward here. 4 amendments that we understand will be going into the crime bill with regards to grooming gangs. First and foremost, it's that top line, the second push for a national public inquiry vote. Also, they're going to ask for the mandated publishing of ethnicity data of grooming gang perpetrators. Thirdly, they also want to make it a case that grooming is an aggravating factor for sentencing for all perpetrators, not just ringleaders. And there was a fourth one in the interview we heard today, which we weren't expecting, that the Tories will also put forward an amendment to remove human rights protections around grooming gang perpetrators, so they can't claim the right to family life in order to evade deportation, as has happened in several occasions. Now, earlier today, Kemi Badenoch met with some survivors and campaigners from Oldham before I sat down with her for this interview. Kemi Badenoch, what did Oldham survivors and campaigners tell you today?
They talked about their sense of betrayal, that the people who should have looked after them and their children did not. But they also talked about wanting justice served. And that's the thing that brings us all together right now, that we know there has been a lot of investigation, but it has not been anywhere near the scale required in order to get to the root of what's been happening across our country. And that's why we have not let this issue of a national inquiry go. We are still pushing for Labour to start a national inquiry. And today we're going to be putting some amendments down in the crime bill so that we can have another vote, which they can't obscure like they did previously, have another vote so that MPs and Parliament can vote on ensuring that we get full justice for all of those victims of the rape gang scandal.
Now, you've already had this vote in January. It was rejected heavily by the government and its MPs. Why do you think this time will be any different? And are you concerned that the exact same result will happen? So
the last time we put our amendment in the schools bill, and the Prime Minister told his MPs that if they didn't help him out, that the schools bill would fall. So a lot of them used that as an excuse, saying they were doing it so that they could have breakfast clubs or something else. Now we're putting it in the crime bill. And we're putting it as an amendment that doesn't take the whole bill out. It's something very specific on this. And the amendments go beyond having a national inquiry. We're going to have an amendment on publishing ethnicity data. We're going to have another amendment to stop people using the fact that they have children or a family as an excuse to not be deported or to not go to prison. We want more than one amendment so that we can get the full scale of public accountability and justice for the victims.
On that last point, that amendment to stop people who have a family using the right to family life to avoid deportation, that's human rights legislation. How are you going to carve out a section from that without overriding the ECHR, for example?
The ECHR has power in our country because it is applied through the Human Rights Act, which is domestic legislation. And this is one of the things that I've said many times, that people use lots of excuses to avoid doing what they need to do. We've had the same thing with the Sentencing Council, where it was trying to put different people into different categories to get sentences based on their ethnicity or leniency based on ethnicity and sex and so on. And the government was saying that nothing could be done, but actually if you put pressure, things can be done. And that's what we're doing as the opposition party. We are putting pressure on the government to do the right thing.
There are some famous cases of grooming gang perpetrators who haven't been deported, particularly in Rochdale, very near to Oldham, where you met those survivors today. Do you get embarrassed when you think about the previous Conservative government's record on failing to deport those perpetrators, some of whom took hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal aid to avoid deportation? Is that a shameful part of the Conservative record?
One of the things that we need to make sure is that people get justice. I have said that the party is under new leadership and we should deport all foreign criminals, irrespective of what crimes they carried out. There are many reasons that could be given about why it didn't happen. Some people were deported, not everybody. Some people had clever lawyers. Some people found loopholes. They used the rights to, of having a family to block it. So every day, every year, we did things to improve the situation. We're not there yet. In our last year, we found 450 perpetrators from that task force. There's always more to be done. And what we're saying is let's keep doing more to make sure that people get justice.
Yesterday, the barrister appointed by the government to set up the 5 local inquiries that Home Secretary announced in January said he had to text a Home Office official, "Do you still want me?" because he said not enough progress had been made, not enough communication had been launched with him. What was your reaction when you heard that?
I wasn't surprised because I don't believe the government wants to do anything, and that's why I'm not letting it go. And when I spoke to the victims just now, one of the things that they said was that there are no other places announced. It's still just Oldham. Where are the other places? Let's get something that covers all of the towns where we found evidence that this scandal occurred. This is a national scandal. They've said that they're going to have a handful that they'll look at, and yet it's still not statutory, so they can't compel witnesses. And as we can see, they're already going slow. It's been 3 months now. It's time for the government to put its money where its mouth is and actually start delivering for the people who need justice.
It's been 3 months, but some people in these areas blighted by these gangs might say, well, it's been 14 years and 3 months. Is there a sense now that the Conservatives are turning a corner on this, or do you have a lot of trust building to go through to convince those communities that the Conservatives really do mean business on this scandal?
It's been far more than 14 years. It's been multiple decades. And in those 14 years, we had some inquiries. We had the child sexual abuse inquiry. It didn't go far enough. We did more. We had a task force. It didn't go far enough. So I'm not going to sit here and act like absolutely nothing was done. I am saying that more needs to be done. Labour government should pick up where we left off and do more, not run away and hide. A lot of the councils that are impacted are Labour-run councils. What are they doing about it? That's what I'm here to talk about. And yes, this is about building trust with the public. I have said that our party made some mistakes when it was in government. If it didn't, we'd still be in government. But that doesn't mean that we're just going to do nothing. We have to keep going. We have to do the job of opposition. That's what my job is now. And it does involve rebuilding trust with the public. But people won't trust you from talking. It's what you do that counts. And that's why we're doing the job of opposition, putting down amendments, forcing a vote. And as one of the victims said to me, every single Labour MP who votes against those amendments should not be able to look themselves in the mirror, and they should be ashamed because they know that they're doing the wrong thing.
One of those amendments you're putting forward, as you've mentioned, the publishing of ethnicity data. Now, a lot of police forces in the country just haven't collected that data when it comes to grooming gang perpetrators. How would you like to see police officers and forces and chiefs that don't do that held to account? Would you like to see some serious sort of ramifications for those involved in that?
Well, once it's law, then they will have to start collecting this data. We've had this problem of lack of data collection in many other areas. I remember during COVID, the ethnicity data wasn't collected, which meant that a lot of conspiracy theories and rumours about who was being impacted and why were getting out there. Collecting data means people can see the truth. It's very important. It's not just in the interests of victims, it's also in the interests of the police forces themselves.
Just one final question. You've obviously said last time we had this interview that those involved in this sort of abuse were peasants. There's also been this discussion that the government is going to look into the cultural and religious and ethnicity factors involved in this sort of abuse. Do you have confidence that they'll look into this honestly, or do you think there should be a cross-party approach as part of that inquiry?
I don't think that this is a party political issue. I do think some parties are more scared of it than others. And we're not scared, and we're going to keep fighting for the people who deserve justice.
Why do you think Labour are scared of those cultural or ethnicity factors?
That's a question you're going to have to ask them.
Okay. No view on that? Is it going to be a voter issue?
I don't know. It's a question you're going to have to ask them.
Okay. Kane Badenoch, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, an important interview there with our GB News national reporter, Charlie Peters, and, of course, Kemi Badenoch. Now, Charlie, what's the government's position on this?
Well, the government in January, they rejected that call for a national statutory inquiry, but they launched 5 local inquiries, putting aside £5 million to do so. They announced that Oldham would be one of those areas. The debate that kind of restarted in January was sparked by a GB News exclusive revealing that Oldham had had a request for a government inquiry rejected. The government have also said that they've launched this rapid review being led by Baroness Louise Casey to look at, as I just mentioned in that interview, the cultural factors that could be linked to this sort of child abuse. That was expected to come back in April, but they've said it's well underway. We're not sure when that's going to happen. We have reached out to the Home Office this evening and not heard a response before broadcast, but they have consistently said that the government takes child sexual exploitation very seriously, and they will be looking into those local inquiries. Yesterday, Tom Crowther, KC, the barrister who's been appointed to create a framework and assess that, and also to chair the Oldham inquiry, which has been described by Labour as a victim-centred inquiry, which really gets results in their perspective. Tom Crowther said that local inquiries can be more effective than statutory inquiries because, he says, they're not having people being cross-examined by lawyers and judges. Instead, people can come in his words, sit down with tea and biscuits and just share information. But critics of the government, including the Conservatives and others, say that it's the only way to get accountability is by compelling people to give testimony and also to give evidence.
And this review by Louise Casey seems to me they're dragging their feet. I mean, we were told 3 months in January. That's middle of this month, isn't it? But they're delaying on getting that going?
Now, we're seeking an update on when that might be published. Still searching for that information. The terms of reference only was published about 8 weeks after it was announced. So there's clearly been a delay there, but no further information on where that might come. But from Kemi Badenoch there, summarising those 4 amendments, we thought there might be 3, but 4 amendments that they're going to push into the crime bill. First and foremost, that national statutory inquiry. Also, the publishing of ethnicity data to be mandated. Grooming to be an aggravated factor in sentencing. And finally, one that came as a surprise during the interview, Kemi Badenoch saying that the Tories will push new legislation to remove human rights protection for grooming gang perpetrators so they can't use the right to family life to avoid deportation. But of course, as I raised in the interview just there, several times under the Conservatives, people successfully used that legislation to avoid deportation, costing the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Charlie, thank you, and great interview there. After the break, we'll be hearing from the reaction to that news from a campaigner who met with Kemi Badenoch and Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp today in Parliament, who told GB News the Labour ministers need to put their hands up and back this national inquiry.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
I do think that there is extremities in how this has been approached with, you can't eat kebabs anymore. The Climate Change Committee isn't talking about banning meat. It's talking about reducing meat, perhaps having some incentives for plant-based diets. It's talking about doing small changes, not phasing out everything, doing small changes to move to a net zero future, a more sustainable future.
How can me not having a large dollar combat, I don't know, China opening 1 coal-fired power station a week? Come on, this is pointless.
Well, there is other things that have been advised beyond just, reducing our meat consumption. There's things around the tax around flying and aviation, producing less fossil fuel imports and switching to more renewable power, upgrading the grid. There's a lot of other advisories collectively that moves us towards a net zero future. There is a few, of course, we can go down the route of, they can't eat the kebab anymore, but there's far more other things at play than just the kebab meat.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, that man again, is just laughing at all this. Drill, baby, drill. You're not telling me that his cabinet are going to chow down on some quinoa. This is a red meat country leading the way, and if we had half a brain about us, we'd be drilling ourselves.
I come from an energy industry background. I work for a data intelligence company, Mapstand, as well. And what we are seeing is that what's happening in America is actually quite short-term thinking. It's not long-term thinking. Whereas in places in China, you're seeing a lot of innovation and green innovation because there is a huge economic opportunity.
Yeah, because they're selling it all to the West and polluting their atmosphere. We're offshoring our carbon footprint and they're selling the solar panels back to us because we're the mugs.
We're also able to be the producers and also change our own energy so that we can also compete.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, before the break, we exclusively revealed in an interview with Kevin Badenoch that the Tories are pushing for a second vote on a national grooming gangs inquiry. In amendments to be tabled tomorrow, they're also calling for the mandatory release of ethnicity data on rape gang perpetrators. Still joining me now here in the studio in Westminster is GB News national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie.
So, Chris, those 4 amendments then announced today that will go forward onto the crime bill tomorrow. The National Inquiry second push, set in bite there, that they're going for it after it was voted against in January in the Commons, but also the mandatory releasing of ethnicity data, controversial because often it's not being collected by police forces, particularly those who have been accused of being nervous about this crisis, but also aggravating factor of sentencing with grooming. Previously, it's only for those who are ringleaders, now for all people involved in gangs. And then finally, that shock, we didn't expect this, that amendment saying that those who might use human rights legislation to prevent against deportation, that'll be culled. Now, Kate Badenoch made those announcements with GB News after meeting with a group of survivors and campaigners, and we spoke with Lucia Ray after her meeting with Kate Badenoch, a local campaigner from Oldham, to ask her what she thought of the meeting. So, Lucia, how was your meeting today with the Leader Opposition?
We was very pleased to hear that she's wanting to continue the fight and hold the government to account on this matter. Delighted to hear that they're going to be putting this vote forward for a statutory national inquiry because, as I said in the meeting, I see this as our national integrity is at stake. We need authorities to be held to account. It is no use with no statutory powers. It brings no justice to victims, to survivors. That will help police with their investigations if it's got statutory powers. We have nothing to fall back on. It's a one-time opportunity, this, now, and we've got to get it right. The world's watching us, and we just believe that national and statutory is the way forward. We don't want another Hillsborough case on our hands where it's going on for years and the families are put through torture. And you only have to compare inquiries that have had statutory powers and ones that haven't and see the difference in getting to the truth much faster, and that's what's needed. We need to show the world how we handle child sexual exploitation in this country, and we don't stand for it.
You've been campaigning on this issue for years now. How does it feel to have so much attention finally turning to the so-called grooming gang scandal?
It's been helpful that the spotlight shined on it. It's been awful for Oldham because the authorities there are under so much attack for negligence, for not cooperating, so that has made survivors highly stressful, their families too. It's become a very toxic place. It's on social media it's become a breeding ground for it's just awful for everybody, and it needs sorting out. Someone needs to lead from the front now and get this sorted out, and let's just hope that them Labour ministers can put their hands up and vote the right way when this vote comes along.
Lucia Ray there, which saying making completely clear why this issue matters so much. And thank you there, Charlie Peters, for a great interview. Now, with me in the studio is former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle and journalist and former LBC presenter Duncan Barks. Lloyd Russell-Moyle, to you first. Why is Labour dragging its heels, in fact refusing to have a national inquiry into this rape gangs issue exposed by Charlie Peters?
Well, I think it's the very opposite of what Labour is doing. Labour is brought forward only a few months ago now the actual amendments to implement the recommendations of the last inquiry, something the Conservatives refused to do for years and years. Labour has been very clear that our view is the priority is the protection of the current children, to change the rules so this doesn't continue to happen. And we are not opposed to a national inquiry, but what we do want to do is to make sure local inquiries and other processes that are going on at the moment all have the statutory powers to call witnesses, the statutory powers to make sure it's illegal for someone to refuse to report these issues when they find out about them. Those things are more important for us because they stop it happening at the moment. And of course we need truth and justice as well. But truth and justice must not come at an expense of getting the actual thing right in the first place. And what we do see with national inquiries, and I'm sorry to say, it makes people feel better, but they often take a long time and they are often very expensive, and their recommendations often dribble through politics over years and decades. And what we need here is quick action. So, yes, there will be, I think, an inquiry at the right time, but we need to implement those things. Inquiry, you think? I think there will be. I mean, Keir said initially he was not against it, but he wanted to make sure we had implemented all the other reviews from the J inquiry, etc. And of course, the other element of what we heard from Kemi here is this aggravated stuff. Well, look, aggravated crimes only work if what you're actually saying is you think the crime of sexually raping and attacking a young person in itself doesn't have enough of a sentence, and so I want to make it more aggravated when you do it in a gang. I actually think that we should be in a situation where we're saying if you rape a young girl repeatedly, whether it's in a gang or not in a gang, you should be looking at life meaning life. And I don't think aggravation is the way forward. I think we need to be looking at how we make these things fully punishable, whether you're in a gang or not. Aggravation only adds time. It doesn't actually change the base time, and the base time at the moment is probably too late.
And
quite wrong. It's been quite wrong.
What Charlie Peters' work has done is found evidence in 50 towns across the country. Only 6 were looked at by J. Only a fraction of the elected J recommendations have been brought in. Why is Labour dragging its feet? There are victims out there. You heard there from Lucia Ray. It's a big issue in a lot of places, and it's not being recognised, it seems, by this government.
No, Labour's policy is to implement all of the recommendations by J, and
there's no timescale yet for that.
And to empower. Well, that's what we're getting around to. We already, only 2 months ago, laid statutory changes in the Children's Bill to implement a number of them. The Children's Bill has to go through Parliament. It takes time, and it is now in the laws, and it is now becoming law. So we are the only party that has done this. The last government didn't do any of it, but we are now implementing some. And what we have done is we have given resources and monies for towns to do town-by-town inquiries to ensure this happens. We've given them the powers to make sure that if any statutory or person employed by the public sector refuses to give evidence, that is a criminal offence in its right. That is the level of a statutory, town by town first, and then a statutory inquiry at the end to work out how those things... Because the problem is, if we do a statutory straight away, you will be back here saying, well, the statutory had too much of an overview and didn't go deep enough into this town or deep enough into that town. We need to get it right because we need to protect our children.
Duncan Barks, isn't this a bit of a political stunt by the Tories? They know these measures won't go through. They want to get Labour MPs voting against national inquiry to put on electoral leaflets back in 2028.
Possibly. First off, Charlie, I mean, kudos to you for the work you've done on this, because you've kept it in the spotlight, and it's the right thing to do because other media organisations haven't. So kudos to you, and thank you for doing it. Is it a political stunt? Well, the charge you put to Kemi Badenoch earlier was, why didn't you do this in government? And she fudged it a little bit. And there's a lot of this kind of humble pie eating going on, and we would have done things differently. We keep hearing this line being trotted out. And you're right to put that question to her, and the last government should have done something. We know that the Labour government has a majority of over 170, so, you know, these amendments aren't going to go through. But it is right from Kemi's perspective, and actually not just from a political perspective, but for the victims and the families' victims, that we're talking about this tonight on GB News. These amendments are out there. We're keeping this in the spotlight because people want answers, and they've not had answers for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And people want to know how this was allowed to happen, whether or not there was any collusion involved, who is responsible for maybe turning a blind eye, and the very sensitive issue that we have here, which is, well, hang on a second, we might not want to probe too deeply because of the issue of race and ethnicity. And I think also it is right. I think these ethnicity figures do need to be published. It's not about being racist, as some people might think. It's about simply just going, we need to know why this is happening and whether or not there's a clash of cultures.
And Charlie Peters, those figures are available in other countries, aren't they, on ethnicity? In recent days, Rupert Lowe, the independent MP, has raised over £400,000 for a national inquiry in 5 days. It shows 12,000 people have given money to this inquiry to fund it. Is that what you want, or doesn't go far enough what Lowe can do?
Well, I'm just a reporter. What I want is irrelevant. It's up for politicians to decide what they want. It's up for campaigners and survivors to speak to them to get that process secured. But it's clear, is it not, from the Rupert Lowe intervention and many others we've heard since then, that there is this clamour around the country for more action. And there has been months, frankly, of silence, of this issue going back into irrelevance for so many people, which is a terrible shame for a lot of those survivors. They thought, I think, in January that with the amount of focus brought back onto it, particularly after the ex-owner Elon Musk started sharing GB News' reporting, that they might finally get what they wanted pushed over the line. It hasn't happened, but there has been a step forward from this Labour government with those local inquiries, new measures, new powers, and the ICSA report being actioned as well. So from a lot of angles, there are political steps being taken that have reassured a lot of survivors. But what I heard today from those in Oldham, those campaigners and survivors I've known in some cases for years, they said they just want more action, they want more investigation. And for them, the statutory point is key, because until you can compel witnesses, until you can compel evidence, you're not going to get enough. You need more information, and you need to cross-examine those guilty men and women who didn't do enough when it was their responsibility.
Charlie, thank you. Lloyd, to you finally. He's right, isn't he? It must be a statutory inquiry.
We have to compel witnesses. We have to make sure that people can't cover this up anymore. That's why Lowe's proposal is rather dangerous in a sense. You end up doing it badly, but also why I actually think his proposal is the most likely to force the government's hand. Amendments in Parliament by Conservatives and stunts will do very little. Potentially proposing an inquiry that could damage the evidence will force, I think, the government to actually step in and make sure they do it properly.
Yeah. Lloyd Russell-Morrill, Duncan Barks, thank you, and Charlie Peters, thank you, Chief, for all your work for GB News. It's really, really important. After the break, President Trump's tariffs kick in tomorrow after the UK failed to negotiate a carve-out. What special relationship? And what does it mean for the UK? Plus, energy bosses are calling on Ed Miliband to increase the cost of gas bills in pursuit of, yes, net zero. We'll be speaking to one of those energy bosses right after the break.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, in less than 2 hours' time, we'll know what tariffs President Donald Trump wants to slap on British companies. We are already bracing for a 25% tariff on British cars exported to America, which could also hit around 25,000 car manufacturing jobs here at home. But despite Sir Keir Starmer's attempts to secure an exemption, Number 10 has admitted that Britain is set to be hit, and hit hard, it looks like. Joining me now in the studio here at GB News Westminster is former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle and journalist and former LBC, forgive me, presenter Duncan Parks. Welcome both. I mean, it is a really worrying time, isn't it? And no one knows what's going to happen next, Duncan.
Well, it's a countdown, isn't it, till 9 o'clock tonight UK time, and I know Patrick Christie's is on later with a big kind of bit of coverage on this. It is a worrying time. I mean, there's some reports out this evening that potentially this could trigger a global recession.
Yep.
Let's look in our own backyard. We talked about the car manufacturing business. Listen, I live in Chichester, West Sussex, just up the road in Goodwood. You've got the Rolls-Royce factory, right? You know, so you're looking at Rolls-Royce, you're looking at Jaguar Land Rover, you're looking at Mini. You've got this potential that if these tariffs come in, 20%, up to 25% on certain products, we could have job losses. And the major blow here, apart from normal people losing their jobs, is what happens with Rachel Reeves. Because if this comes in, I mean, we had last week the OBR slashing growth from 2% to 1%. Again, the report's out this evening that if Trump does hit us in the same way as everyone else, our growth could be damaged by about 0.25%.
And I'm looking at the markets today. The stock market is down. The stock market's down in America. There's reports tonight.
Gold has gone up.
Gold's gone up. The safe investment, which always goes up in times of difficulty. There's rumours there might be reciprocal tariffs in 3 bands. Lloyd Russell-Moyle, 10%, 15%, 20%, differing to different nations and sectors. We think we're America's best friend, that special relationship. This could be tested tonight, couldn't it?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to be treated like everyone else, and we're not going to be given a special deal. I think that's clear from all the conversations we've had. And I think it's clear, however, that Trump is preferencing us to negotiate our way out of this first. So we might get the advantage of being the first out, but we are definitely going to be in the regime.
And it could remove all the growth next year. Disappear completely, just the forecast from last week.
Yeah, but the difficulty for the government is, do you want to keep Trump on side, hope that you'll be the first out by not slapping reciprocal tariffs on, or do you slap reciprocal tariffs on and then upset the man who's got very thin skin and end up being put at the back of the queue? And I think that is what the government is juggling at the moment. So I think it's too early to say that there will be reciprocal tariffs, because we will need to work out what the best strategy is for our country. But there are other countries we could learn to. We could create a new trading zone between Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Europe of the free trade nations. We could do that. But do we have the leadership?
Duncan, briefly.
Briefly, very quickly, it's hard to know if this is genuine or a bit of bluster in order to start the negotiation. I read his book 20 years ago, The Art of the Deal by Trump, and he's very good at stomping his feet and making people nervous to get them in a weak position. A vulnerable position to get what he wants.
Duncan Lloyd, thank you. Now, moving on, energy suppliers are calling for higher gas bills to encourage more households to switch to electric heat pumps and electric vehicles. Right now, electricity users pay significantly more in green levies than gas users, which suppliers argue discourages cleaner energy choices. But here's the catch. These heat pumps cost about 10 grand more than your typical gas boiler at home. And with bills already a concern for many, is this really the right move? Now, joining me now in the studio is Camilla Bourne, the CEO of Electrify Britain, one of the signatories of a letter to Ed Miliband. Camilla, please explain why you think this makes sense, because it doesn't to me.
That's a fair challenge, but I guess you and I and everyone who's watching and listening right now will have experienced our bills go up massively over the last few years because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is something that we cannot see keeping to go up. And that happened because we are subject to the international gas markets. And those markets mean that the bills look how they say. If we actually use the clean energy we have here and did that homegrown use of that energy, we can really control those prices. Yes. Today, it was more than 80% of our electricity was coming from renewables. It was a sunny, blustery day, which is incredibly impressive, and only 5% gas. That's the future. If we can pass those benefits of that clean energy to people in their homes, then we can control prices so much better than we can with the gas markets.
And store energy, of course. And do you have a heat pump?
I wish I had a heat pump. So I would love to have one.
Is 10,000 quid more than a gas boiler?
Well, I wish I could get one. Let's see how much it would actually cost to run in my home. I don't know. What I think is really tricky right now is that it does cost, more than it should do because we have these extra levies on gas. And it's important. We need to protect people from the fact that bills have been so high, and it's understandable that the government spent 96 billion in response to the energy crisis.
Yeah.
We can't afford to do that again, though. We need to make sure that we've got the modern, updated tech in our homes, which allows us to have cheaper bills. So I'd love to have a heat pump. I'd love to have a heat pump run on cheaper electricity.
Is the answer, though, to try and ramp up the gas bills to try and make the heat pumps more affordable, more attractive to households?
So I think
we're talking in a week. Awful April started yesterday, didn't
absolutely.
it? With the bills going up for many people.
And we have to hold that in our heads. If we don't hold that in our heads and make this decision clear-sighted, then we're making the wrong decisions. But if we're in the situation we're in, it means that we're dependent on those gas markets. They are controlling the level of those bills. If we can make that about the clean energy we have at home, then we can have so much more control over it. So yes, we need to think about how do we do this sensibly. At the moment, it is a dreadfully unfair system. We're proposing to change it to a fairer system, but of course there's some unfairnesses within it. At the moment, those on electricity, on electric heating, using electricity in that way, are 24.5% likely to be in fuel poverty, whereas with gas it's 11.7%. I don't think anyone should be in fuel poverty. I think we have to target and support and make sure we're not in that situation. But the electric is better. People prefer it. It's a nicer way of being heated at home.
No, I mean, net zero makes sense, but it's how you get there which so many people at GB News and viewers, listeners are upset about. The cost imposed on people who can't afford it.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, you don't want to be told what to do, you want to be able to access things. I think the challenge...
And cheaper, you can't, the affordability is huge.
And you're not going to win a kind of net zero argument unless it's better. But what I've really observed from talking to people in their homes, going around the country, talking to workplaces, to industry, is that it is better. It's modern, better tech. And, I'll pay for an upgraded phone because I want a better one. Yeah. We will have to pay something for some of these upgrades, but we're not saying that we should do it immediately. We have to do it when your boiler breaks. You have to do it when you're, oh my goodness, my bill is too high. Can I get solar and pay it off within a couple of years? It's absolutely worth it.
Camilla Bourne, thank you for joining us tonight on GBN Tonight. And also to my panel, of course, Lloyd Russell-Moyle and Duncan Barks. Next, I'm joined by the director of More in Common, who published a new poll today, a bombshell poll showing the Tories leading in voting attention, narrowly ahead, of course, of Reform UK. Now, Luke Trill will also be talking to me about his polling focus groups. They revealed a depressing change in how we interact with each other, a sad legacy, if you like, of the COVID pandemic.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi there. Plenty of sun to be had in the UK over the next few days, but if you're thinking of heading further afield, there are still some thunderstorms across Greece and Turkey, and some very unsettled weather moving through Madeira into the Canary Islands. A showery day to come on Thursday, and then further showers or spells of rain into Spain as well as Portugal. A few showers on Thursday for Italy, but the most showery weather will continue to affect Greece as well as Turkey. That is tending to ease away over the next few days into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. For most of us, it stays dry and clear during the next 24 hours. Some patchy cloud turning up, but in the southwest, a very different weather for Thursday compared with the last few days. Showers start to arrive because of an area of low pressure that's some distance to the southwest. Meanwhile, high pressure to the northeast keeps things dry and clear for most of us. There'll be a bit of patchy cloud forming over the Welsh Mountains, the Peak District, the Pennines overnight, one or two patches here and there elsewhere. But for many places, it's simply a dry and clear night with a keen easterly breeze. In the south, it's going to be frost-free. Further north, less windy. And as a result, a touch of frost to wake up to first thing, particularly for the Grampians, northeast Scotland. Further south, though, a very different start to the day for the far south and southwest. Here, showers start to turn up. These showers are going to be very hit and miss, but yeah, a few drops of rain, marking a change to the drier weather that we've had during the last week or so. But for much of Scotland into Northern Ireland, it's sunny skies from the word go. One exception, southeast Scotland through the Pennines into parts of Wales. That patchy cloud I mentioned, that's going to stick around for the first few hours of the day before eventually lifting and clearing. That leaves most of us with another sunny day. Again, an easterly breeze makes it feel cool, but very different for the south and southwest of England. Here, thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the afternoon, turning more persistent in places as the day comes to an end. That moves north through Wales overnight into parts of Northern Ireland by the start of Friday, but it really fizzles out by this stage. And into Friday afternoon, well, the sunshine returns for the vast majority, but there will be some low cloud around the east coast, particularly for Edinburgh as we head into the weekend. Elsewhere, the sunshine continues and it stays warm away from the east.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Christopher Hope. Now, a new More in Common poll places the Tory party in first place. There it is on the screen now, with 26% of the vote, closely followed by Reform UK, Nigel Farage's outfit at 25%. And More in Common's focus groups also revealed a depressing legacy of the COVID pandemic in Britain's workplaces. Increasingly, apparently, we are turning inward, away from each other. The new Netflix show Adolescence deals with this idea of social isolation. But is the problem wider than that, away from children? This loneliness, a retreat from social spaces and the loss of in-person working could impact our future generations. Joining me now to discuss this is Luke Trill, the director of More in Common. Luke, thank you for joining us. I find it quite a moving article you wrote today about this, when you describe what you heard from these working individuals, these working men and women in your focus groups, and the effect of isolation post-COVID.
Absolutely. So we started thinking about this when I ran a focus group in Dudley, and I heard from Clive, who is a crane driver there. and he was talking, he gave his views on the government, which weren't very complimentary. And then he started talking about other issues in society. And he said, the big problem is we haven't really properly recovered from COVID. And what he said to me was, and it really stuck with me, he said, before COVID, on our construction sites, we all used to have lunch together. But since then, we just sit in our cars and eat alone on our break. And I was like, wow, that is such a big shift. And it was interesting. He said that. And then throughout the focus group, the other participants started saying, yeah, it's the same with me. We don't have the work banter anymore. We used to go for drinks with our colleagues. We don't do that anymore. People were saying it extends outside of work. There's one guy who was saying, yeah, I just don't go to the pub at all anymore. And it was, I think sometimes there's an assumption that COVID happened, and then for lots of people, particularly people in Westminster, I guess, things just went back to normal straight away. But since then, I've been talking to more and more people in focus groups who said it hasn't gone back to normal. I'm spending more time alone. I don't see my mates as much. And as you said in the introduction, we spent a lot of time focusing on, rightly, I think, on young people and isolation. Of course, many young people never got the chance to make friends at all because of the pandemic. But I don't think we're focusing enough on the long-term social cost of things like lockdown, which do seem to have just, basically turned us in on ourselves, leaving us more atomized, more isolated.
Is that because there's now risk, there's the HR risk if young people mix with managers and comments in pubs get misinterpreted? Or is that part of it? Or is it people want to watch their screens, their phones in their cars, and have a packed lunch and not talk to their mates sitting around a building site?
I think probably both of those have a role to play, but it was also interesting, since I posted that piece on The Spectator, I've had lots of people coming and saying it's exactly the same for me. And one point that someone made, which I thought was really interesting, was that actually they'd lost social confidence during the pandemic, that, as a natural introvert, they'd sort of had to force themselves to it. And COVID had basically said, it doesn't matter, because you're just stuck in your home. But then they'd carried on working from home. And so I don't think we look at that either. And then, of course, on top of that, we came out of the pandemic and into a cost of living crisis.
Yes.
And the other thing we hear in focus groups so often is, well, I just don't have any money left over at the end of the month for the fun stuff.
Luke, while I've got you, that polling there, surprising to see the Tories doing well, given they feel they aren't doing well and they're not given a chance by the electorate because of 14 years of, in some time part of it. On screen there is the polling you had earlier.
Yeah, and look, ordinarily we wouldn't be saying 26% for the Tories was a good result, but what seems to have happened is that since the election, they're basically holding their own, right? They're holding on to those voters that stuck with them last time, Reform making big gains, and Labour, falling down 21%, the lowest we've recorded for them.
Luke Trill from More in Common, thank you for joining us tonight on a busy night for you. Thank you for joining us by Zoom. Still with me in the panel in the studio, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, former Labour MP, and the journalist and former LBC presenter, Duncan Bach. Does that chime with you, Lloyd Russell-Moyle, the issue of isolation for our age group, older than young people?
Well, I think it's a problem for all groups in society. And I think that bit that you said at the end, many people, I even have elements of it, hard to believe, have kind of introverted elements. But in society, we were encouraged and persuaded to intervene with other people, and you saw the good that came out of that. And if that encouragement doesn't happen, now, you can create government policy that changes that. So in Belgium, for example, there is a government policy that for tax-free, you can get a lunch voucher if you eat at the lunch canteen or a local shop round the corner. You get out of the office, you get basically a 20 to 40% reduction in your food price, and you eat then communally, and you can't do it if you're buying a packed lunch, for example. So there are things I think that the government could do that would also help revive the high street. Because it encourages people to get out and use small businesses. So that's what I would love to see.
It's really interesting, the findings of that, because I see it still. I think we're not going to see for years and years the impact of COVID, what it's had on society and people's development. And even I feel it, as a regular pub goer. I walk into a pub and if it's crowded, I just stop for a second because we were almost retrained in our minds to kind of like go, a lot of people in here, it might not be very healthy. And I think it's going to take a long time to overcome that.
Big concerns. OK, so Laura Russell-Moyle and Duncan Bach, thank for joining us on the panel tonight. Next up, of course, it's the legend that is Matt Goodwin. Here he is with State of the Nation. Matt, what's on?
A legend. Wow, what a compliment. We're going to be looking at Trump's Liberation Day with top US experts. We're going to be looking at what is driving this push for tariffs. What's the philosophy behind that? We're also going to be looking at Kemi Badenoch's plans for new changes around the rape gangs, or the grooming gangs, as some people call them. And also, we've got a policy specialist coming in to tell us why Britain can't deport more of these foreign criminals. The Telegraph, again, full of stories this week about Albanian criminals that we can't remove. And lastly, Brendan O'Neill is joining us to talk about the growing fragmentation of British society. Why are British MPs campaigning for an airport in Pakistan?
You might ask that question. Just while I've got you, you saw that polling there. Why are the Tories ahead of Reform UK? Are Reform UK topping out in the polls?
So it's interesting. If you look at the Reform Party, they're poaching about 1 in 4 people that voted Tory last year. But there are some tough questions, I think, here for Reform as to why they're not doing a bit better than they are.
Well, I'll be talking tomorrow night to Nigel Farage for an interview on this programme. And I come up, as you heard there, State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. I'm back tomorrow night, as I say, with Nigel Farage. Put that in your diary. You won't want to miss it. But first, though, here's the weather with Aidan McGibbon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. For most of us, it stays dry and clear during the next 24 hours. Some patchy cloud turning up, but in the southwest, a very different weather for Thursday compared with the last few days. Showers start to arrive because of an area of low pressure that's some distance to the southwest. Meanwhile, high pressure to the northeast keeps things dry and clear for most of us. There'll be a bit of patchy cloud forming over the Welsh Mountains, the Peak District, the Pennines overnight, 1 or 2 patches here and there elsewhere. But for many places, it's simply a dry and clear night with a keen easterly breeze. In the south, it's going to be frost-free. Further north, less windy. And as a result, a touch of frost to wake up to first thing, particularly for the Grampians, northeast Scotland. Further south, though, a very different start to the day for the far south and southwest. Here, showers start to turn up. These showers are going to be very hit and miss, but yeah, a few drops of rain, marking a change to the drier weather that we've had during the last week or so. But for much of Scotland into Northern Ireland, it's sunny skies from the word go. One exception, southeast Scotland through the Pennines into parts of Wales. That patchy cloud I mentioned, that's going to stick around for the first few hours of the day before eventually lifting and clearing. That leaves most of us with another sunny day. Again, an easterly breeze makes it feel cool, but very different for the south and southwest of England. Here, thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the afternoon, turning more persistent in places as the day comes to an end. That moves north through Wales overnight into parts of Northern Ireland by the start of Friday, but it really fizzles out by this stage. And into Friday afternoon, well, the sunshine returns for the vast majority, but there will be some low cloud around the east coast, particularly for Edinburgh as we head into the weekend. Elsewhere, the sunshine continues and it stays warm away from the east.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not 1, but 2 sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching State of the Nation on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. On tonight's show, the day is finally here. At 9 p.m. tonight, President Trump will announce his Liberation Day tariffs on a number of US imports. Tonight, I'll be speaking to two leading US voices on what this means for the UK and the wider world. Meanwhile, in the UK, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has exclusively revealed to GB News her plans to continue to push for a grooming gangs, or should we say rape gangs, inquiry. We'll also be looking at the hundreds of Albanian criminal illegal migrants who are dodging deportation. I'll be speaking to public policy specialist Lucy White in the studio tonight. Plus, I'll be discussing the bizarre tale of British MPs lobbying for an airport in Pakistan. You heard that right. What on earth is this telling us about the dire state of our country? That's State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, founder of Novara Media, Arabistani, and deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay. And of course, you can reach out on X at GoodwinMJ or at GB News. But now it's time for the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Matt, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your headlines. Donald Trump is set to unveil his new tariffs in the next hour as European leaders warn against a trade war. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says the UK rules nothing out as it braces for Trump's expected global tariffs. The US president's so-called Liberation Day event is expected around 9 o'clock this evening, UK time, with fears of a 25% import tax on British cars and wider tariffs on UK exports. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions today, Sir Keir Starmer warned that a trade